Our Healthy Men, the Prostate Cancer Question and Answer radio show. And welcome back to Our Healthy Men, your prostate cancer question and answer show. I'm your producer, Jade Harrell, and we are back. Yes, we are trying to make a difference, make sure that we understand the prostate, what prostate cancer is, so we can reduce these devastating numbers and the disparities that we're experiencing and seeing in our community. So we've got the best of the best, of course, and so your hosts are with us today, Dr. Lannis Hall. Hello. And we have Dr. Arnold Bullock. Yes, Washington University. Our last episode, in episode 1, you got to discover and understand what your prostate cancer is, how it functions, and the basic anatomy of the amazing, as Dr. Hall says, the amazing prostate. So now we need to take a look at, well, what happens if it's not functioning as it should? Today we are talking about stats and facts, and so we are going to start with some background and the incidences and the epidemiology, if I said that correctly.
Very good.
With our doctors today. Dr. Hall, starting with you, give us a little bit about the background that we need to be aware of when it comes to talking about prostate cancer.
We came together, a whole bunch of physicians, including Dr. Bullock and myself, because this is a common disease. Prostate cancer affects 1 in 7 men, 1 in 6 African American men, and 1 out of 23 African American men will die of the disease. So it is the most common cancer diagnosed in men and the second leading cause of death in men. And for African American men, they have the highest mortality of any ethnic and racial group in this country. And the incidence, meaning how often we get it, is some of the highest in the world. When you look at African American men and their incidence, and the only people who are rivaling African American men are Jamaican men and Caribbean men. And so this is a disease that we must be intimately knowledgeable about. We need to understand it because the survival rate is excellent if detected early and treated early. But if you wait until much later in the disease process, it's much harder to treat. And if unfortunately you wait until it metastasizes or spreads to other places in the body, then it's incurable. We can treat it, and we could treat it for years, but you can't cure it, make it go away permanently. So this prostate cancer show today is about understanding the facts, because it impacts somebody you know, a relative of yours. It's just that common.
Sure. Dr. Bullock, do you want to chime in on the incidences as well?
Well, know, these numbers that we quote now are better than what they were even 30 years ago.
Okay.
So if we go back historically and you say, why if we have such a high rate of prostate cancer and prostate cancer death disparity is so much greater now, it wasn't that much greater in the past, but that's not true because, we now can correctly diagnose prostate cancer. Person comes in with weight loss, bone pain, widely spread bone cancer. One of the first things a doctor's going to check is a PSA to figure out where that bone cancer is from, but we didn't have that years ago. And so we have made some improvements, but our improvements have a long way to go. Let's give some numbers. Back in 1984, if you look at the statistics that were published by the American Cancer Society, it was suggested that 2 out of every 3 African American men at the time they were diagnosed already had cancer spread to some other part of their body.
2 out of 3.
2 out of 3 already had cancer spread. They weren't candidates for any kind of cure. And you had 1 out of 3 whites. And so it was bad for the whites. Right. Yeah. I mean, so it was bad for everybody. And so we don't see numbers anywhere like that. And a lot of that is because of the public notoriety of prostate cancer. Campaigns to say, if you have prostate cancer and you care about your family members, please, directly or indirectly, let your family members know that someone in your family has prostate cancer. It's such a shame where you have family members, fathers who are too embarrassed over the diagnosis of prostate cancer to tell their own sons, let alone tell their nephews or their cousins. And so we went from 2 out of 3 having metastatic disease at the time they were diagnosed to now the number is under 10%.
Right,
Wow.
right. Even 5% at this point presenting with metastatic disease, and that's I can't tell you how remarkable that is.
Yes.
We just don't see that.
Sure.
we don't see it. We have great screening for breast. We have great screening for colorectal carcinoma. We just don't see that kind of drop, and it is really due to the PSA, a blood test, a very simple blood test that can give us a snapshot on the health of the prostate.
Before we go, there are a couple of words that came out that I wanted to clear up. So you said PSA was a blood test for the screening, and then you said metastatic.
Yes.
What does that mean?
Well, metastatic means cancer that's gone to some other part of your body.
Okay.
People, let's talk about that just a second.
Because every now and then I'm going to need a thesaurus so that y'all can bring me along.
People say, well, hold it, doc. Why are you still examining me or checking my PSA if you took my prostate out? How could I get prostate cancer back? I said, well, because cancer can spread, by many different ways. And so your cancer could have spread to my lung. Well, if I had cancer in my lung, then it would be lung cancer.
Right.
That's like a guy.
Right.
I
love his story.
This is my analogy. I got all these analogies in my office.
Yes.
I said, so let me ask you something. If you hired a guy who was in your restaurant and you hired him to clean up your restaurant, he's in your restaurant, you can't talk to the guy. He only speaks Chinese. But he's in your restaurant in Kansas. Would you call him a guy who's from Kansas or a guy who's from China? It'd be a guy from China. I don't care where he is. He's a Chinese guy.
That's a great analogy.
At the end of the day, he's a Chinese guy working in your restaurant in Kansas.
And at the end of the day, this is prostate cancer working in your body or spreading through your body as prostate cancer.
But we're bringing up a common misunderstanding. Cancer goes from the original site, from the prostate gland, and if it does spread to the lungs and the liver and the bone, it is not that you go home and say, I now have lung, liver and bone cancer.
Well,
no, you have
metastatic
prostate cancer that is spread. So if a biopsy is taken from that area, the lung, liver, bone, it's not going to show that it's a lung cancer. It's going to show it's prostate cancer that's spread to the lung. So that's why we commonly do a biopsy. Even if someone like remotely had a history of a cancer treated 10 years ago and we see something suspicious, we want to do a biopsy. You don't just presume that it must be back. It could truly be something different.
Sure.
So in order to make sure you understand what's going on, that's why we commonly will rebiopsy that area.
I love it. But this is the Stats and Facts show. So fact is, if you have prostate cancer and it spreads, which is metastasizes, then it is still prostate cancer, even though it's wandered somewhere else in your body. Correct. As with the other cancers. So that's a great lesson to learn. And the last one was carcinoma. Is that essentially another word for cancer?
It is. Okay. And it's a type of cancer that starts in the epithelium. So, we have different kinds of cancers. You have cancers that are manifest in the bloodstream, and you have cancers that develop in the lymph glands. We call that lymphoma. When we have cancers that develop in a solid tumor, like the lung and like the liver and also like the prostate gland, we call those carcinomas. They begin in the epithelium. So you
she said epithelium like that was different than the epithelium. I get it though, but I definitely am making the connection there. Yes,
in the linings.
Yes.
So I just wanted to go back to a point. Back in the 80s when we said how many people were presenting with metastatic or disease that was not just in the prostate gland, but it had the opportunity to spread, I wanted to bring out 2 points.
Okay.
One, typically there are no early signs and symptoms of prostate cancer. So you might say, how is it that all of these men back then were presenting with disease that had already spread from the prostate to other organs? Well, it's because typically there are no early signs and symptoms. So I don't want people to think, I don't have blood in my urine, I don't have pain down there, so I'm all good. No, you don't have to be all good.
So baseline is we're not all good. We should continually, when your word was be aware.
Screened. We're gonna
Yes,
talk about
we will
screenings when we, in our future episodes, but this has to keep coming out that there are no early signs and symptoms. And then finally, back in the day, you might say, why do I hear about prostate cancer so much now?
Yeah.
Didn't seem to hear about it as much before. And Dr. Bullock and I have talked about this often. When you present with metastatic prostate cancer, the treatment back in the day, was an orchiectomy or removing the testicles, because it's the testosterone that drives the growth of the prostate cancer.
That's right. And we learned that in the first episode.
Yes.
So make sure you go back and check out the first episode to understand the anatomy. But this is why. Yeah.
And so one of the main treatments for metastatic prostate cancer is to lower the testosterone and starve that prostate cancer cell so you can promote death, or what we call apoptosis or necrosis or breakdown.
Sure.
And so if a patient is having an orchiectomy, that's not something you go home and talk about around the dinner table after that has occurred. So you don't have the father telling the sons, okay, let me tell you what I've had to go through. Many times it just becomes silent.
Right.
Yeah.
And so this has been a real problem, that men aren't talking to their sons and talking to their family about what they've gone through, so that they can help protect the family and say, hey, you've got to get this checked out because I had it. And so not like women who will go in the bathroom and say, I just had this breast, look at this.
In fact, I was going to ask you when you went out to the car, could we do a quick, just to be sure.
Just to be sure. When you do that examination.
But I think, isn't that a men thing? And so we don't want to gang up on you, Dr. Bullock, but it's not like you're talking about much of anything with one another. Other than what's under the hood.
If you go back historically, and even to this day, there are patients who will prefer to go see an internist who won't do the prostate exam. They'll say, I'd rather go see doctor over here because Dr. B over here, he doesn't stick his finger in my bottom. But this doctor, Dr. A, I'm not seeing him no more, because every time I go see him, he want to put his finger in my butt. And as if Dr. B is a better doctor.
Because
as if the Dr. A enjoys putting his finger in his tush. But that's, so imagine 30 years ago, if the majority of patients had cancer spread before we had an injection or medicine you could take that would lower the testosterone. The presumption is a lot of men who had prostate cancer had the testicles removed. Maybe you would be a little shy to tell people you had prostate cancer, because the assumption would be Uncle Joe over there probably had his nuts removed.
Way to keep it real. That's what we're hoping for.
And so nowadays, I can't remember the last time we've taken out a guy's testicles. By 1990, that was almost a thing of the past, because you could get a shot in your buttocks that would lower your testosterone.
Sure.
And no one can tell that you were getting the shots. I mean, no one can tell. Your voice doesn't change.
Normal.
You don't all of a sudden start wearing an apron on your chest. You know what I mean?
Your voice doesn't get higher, as my patients say. Well, my voice get higher. No, your voice does not get
as it just did, right? That's funny.
So there's history behind a lot of the things that happen. There is some historic basis for it. The presumption that don't have surgery, the cancer is probably, the air make the cancer spread. Well, you think about the percentage of people who had cancer that was already spread. We didn't have CT scans. We didn't have MRIs for certain. So the only way you know that cancer was spread was you open a person up. And as soon as you open them, you're like, oh, wow, there's nodules on the liver. We might as well close them up. So 3 months later, the person's dead.
Okay, we got to talk about the air.
Yeah.
That's it. So our stats and facts include some of these myths, because we're thinking these are the facts, but we're going to clarify what's for real and what's maybe not so accurate.
Well, they're just okay.
But I've heard they cut it open and get air on it, it's gonna spread.
It's gonna spread.
I come from that school.
As if we don't breathe in air. That is.
But you didn't cut it open. See,
that
when
is
you cut it open
in the bloodstream in every cell.
Yes.
So we just need to dispel that.
So we can go ahead and.
But the historic basis of that belief is real.
Okay.
That before we had CT scans and MRIs, I'm sure at the
like
time
Shirley was fine.
when Lannis was in med school and when I was in med school in residency, that we would do an exploratory laparotomy. Mm-hmm. Exploratory laparotomy. That's, even though we use that phrase nowadays, it really is not all the way true, because we have CT scans and MRIs that shows us exactly where we're going, exactly what we plan to do when we open someone up now. But in 1988, we'd open a person up who had kidney cancer, and before we got to the kidney, the routine was you put your hand around the liver. You run the bowel to feel for lymph nodes in the mesentery of the small bowel. And if you found these big hard nodules on the liver, that means the cancer was spread. The air didn't make it spread. It was spread from the moment you cut the dude open.
But we wouldn't have known until you got it.
Right.
And they say Uncle Joe died because they went to this hospital.
Went there, right.
They opened him up.
And
Uncle Joe was doing great until that air got to him,
but
and he died.
But the truth is, Uncle Joe wasn't doing great, or he wouldn't have been in the surgical suite having an operation.
Right. Now, see, today we have access to a urologic surgeon.
Yes.
And we have access to a radiation oncologist. I mean, even when I was in school, I can say, I'm going to give Dr. Hollikai and, get an understanding. And if we're looking at just, okay, well, he seemed fine before.
Right.
But he went in for a reason. And so that's the part that we can't discount, that if he went in for a reason, there was something going on that he wasn't talking about initially anyway. And then the discovery may have come about. Right. And that's a really key thing to distinguish.
One stat, and I remember this vividly because it used to be on my slide.
Sorry.
1981, the American Cancer Society did a study, and it asked what percentage of blacks believe this. It was like 54% of blacks believe that air causes cancer to spread. Sure. And it was only 8% of whites who said they even heard such a crazy thing.
Wow. Well, it's cultural. It's definitely, there's some cultural things that I think we're going to talk about, as well as our geological
But can I just bring up something? There is good reasons why there is a lot of mistrust in our healthcare system, why people did not go to the doctor in the past.
Okay.
We have...
What's an example? What is one of the reasons?
Oh, my goodness. Well, let's just start with...
Henrietta Lacks.
Well, we can start with Henrietta Lacks, or we can just start with what's called the Mississippi appendectomy.
Come on, okay.
We have Fannie Lou Hamer, and we know who she was. Grew up in Mississippi, went to the doctor, had a little abdominal pain, came out, had a hysterectomy, didn't know that she had a hysterectomy. She worked for the sister. The doctor and the surgeon who did the hysterectomy told the sister, I removed your servant's uterus, so she can't have any kids, so you don't have to worry about that. And that is how she found out what she had done. And it's called a Mississippi appendectomy, meaning they would tell people, we just took out your appendix. But at the same time, they removed your uterus and you're infertile.
Sure.
And so the thought was, we don't need all of these kids. We want her working, and we don't want her to have kids. And so that's what you talk about, mistrust of the healthcare community. Not, I was going to say Tuskegee, but that's always talked about. I want to say there are a lot of other things that happen,
which is why that distrust is so widespread.
Which is why it's widespread, and why we're doing this show to say, times have changed.
And we didn't have y'all in these places.
No, we didn't have us in these places.
So that helps. Tremendous.
So things have changed. My sister-in-law was born at Jewish. She's my age, and because she couldn't be born on the upper floors at Barnes. But by the time my wife, who's a couple years younger, was born at Barnes,
Right.
not in the basement.
She was
A lot
in the
of changes.
basement.
Yeah,
And
not
people
in the
talk about
basement.
that
Yeah,
all
yeah,
the time.
yeah.
Oh, no,
Wow.
we were only in the basement.
Yeah, so
That's
it
huge.
changed.
It does.
50
It does.
years ago was when it changed.
Absolutely.
But you think about residents. The first African American who finished in surgery at Barnes is in my era.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
think about that.
it's a long time coming.
People
Yeah.
don't believe it to be the case, but
That's
think
right.
about that.
That's right. And and the realization is that it's not that long ago.
Not that
We think
long
it's so
ago.
many generations removed, and it really isn't. It's
not.
within this lifetime.
But also, not only are we're there with the presence, we're supported by the director of Siteman, and Dr. Abalon is the chief of surgery at WashU. He affords a lot of the things that we're able to do through Siteman.
Yeah.
Right.
And so we're not just there as figureheads. I mean, we're actively involved in research nowadays. There's so many levels of assurance,
Right.
of protection for
Yeah.
all participants that that we really encourage people, because we can't tell you for sure how this drug will work on an African American unless an African American is part of the trials
Sure.
to see
That's
how
right.
it works.
We've got clinical trials on our list of
Right.
episodes to go into major depth. We're going to take a quick break as we're getting into the stats and facts. That background is deep and heavy. Again, we just really want to thank the BJH Foundation for supporting this program and their donations for the Prostate Cancer Coalition. You can always find out more at prostatecancercoalitionstl.org. We'll be right back. The Siteman Cancer Center is a proud sponsor of the Our Healthy Men radio show. Siteman Cancer Center, national leaders in cancer, whose mission is to prevent cancer in the community and transform cancer patient care through scientific discovery, one patient at a time. Learn more at siteman.wustl.edu. Stay connected on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and Pinterest. Phone number 800-600-3606. And welcome back, Our Healthy Men, the prostate cancer question and answer radio show. I'm your producer, Jade Harrell. Dr. Hall, Dr. Bullock, we're going to jump back in episode stats and facts we're talking about. Did a little bit about background. We need to talk about risk factors.
Right.
Let's start with risk factors.
So we usually divide risk factors into modifiable and non-modifiable risk factors, and non-modifiable risk factors are those types of factors you can't do anything about. For example, your family is your family. You can't get rid of your family. So
Didn't get to pick them.
That you don't get to pick them. So that's non-modifiable. So
Okay.
your family history matters. And we know that if you have a first-degree relative, so that's a father or a brother or your son, those are all first degree. If one of them has a diagnosis of prostate cancer, then you are at risk 2 to 3 times greater to develop prostate cancer. So that's a non-modifiable risk factor. And if you have 2 first-degree relatives, so let's say you have 2 brothers, or my dad has prostate cancer, or my older brother has prostate cancer, then you have a 5 times greater risk of developing prostate cancer.
Because of them? No.
because of your family.
And you can't, yeah.
Age. Prostate cancer is not diagnosed commonly in very young people. It is the median age of diagnosis is around 67 years of age. So this is a disease of older men. So age increases your risk. That's non-modifiable because you can't all of a sudden stop aging. I am trying, trying, but you can't do it.
You two seem to defy it. I got you.
And then the last non-modifiable risk factor is your ethnicity and race. You know, whether you're Latino, so that's ethnicity, or whether you're white or African American, you cannot change that. Right. So that's another non-modifiable risk factor, and we know that African American men have an incidence that's 70% higher, and then we said the mortality is 2.4 times greater than white men and 5 times greater than Asian men. So these are the non-modifiable risk factors of prostate cancer.
Why is being black a risk factor, Doc?
Well, you know, there's a lot of controversy as to what's behind it. They have identified breast cancer genes And so there's probably a genetic basis behind higher incidence and higher mortality rates of prostate cancer in blacks versus whites.
We're more prone to it. Is that what they're saying?
So, it certainly runs in the family, and that's a genetic basis, and genetic basis race also is related to genes.
Yeah.
But there may be modifiable factors involved also with being African American. We blacks haven't been successful enough for enough generations to rule out our habits. So, like myself, I'm proud to be a second-generation college graduate. My parents graduated from college. They were school teachers, but my grandparents weren't. So my parents, during my upbringing, ate similar to their people before them. They hadn't acquired enough wealth where we ate Scrabble. We had our can of Crisco with bacon grease on the stove, and everything was fried. And so I don't know if we have enough population of people to say that our diet could be excluded as a factor, because it's African Americans consume more of fatty products, or a higher percentage of our diet is fat.
And processed foods.
Than most any other population in the world.
Are we more inclined to that because of heritage, or is that another genetic thing?
It's economic.
Absolutely.
I mean, we know that when we have more options and food choices, and more knowledgeable about what is better for our bodies and able to act on it, we do.
Absolutely. That's where it originated, actually. Yeah. What was left was what we had.
Right.
So this is where we're talking about modifiable type of risk factors.
Yeah, and the thing, I wish I could say that it's just straightforward. The data is just so clear that if you eat a low-fat diet, you'll prevent prostate cancer. That data is not out there, but there's just some common sense that needs to go on.
All right, break it down.
And what we know is, just look at it this way. Asian populations have the lowest risk of developing prostate cancer, even when people immigrate or come over to the United States. And we look at their risk for developing prostate cancer, and you compare it to their cohorts and families back in Asia, their risk starts to go up as they develop the environment and the habits of being now an American. Now, they never go up as high as white Americans or African Americans in the incidence and mortality, but it goes up. And so it's interesting that we know that environment really does play a role. I will say that, what's the number one cause of death for men and women? It's cardiovascular disease. So a low-fat diet, and exercising 30 to 45 minutes a day, 5 to 7 days a week is just what we need to do to reduce our risk of several cancers and to reduce our risk for cardiovascular disease, reduce our risk for dementia and Alzheimer's. It just goes on and on. The benefits of exercise and really modifying our diet to 5 to 7 fruits and vegetables and lean proteins. It's just better all the way around. We don't have the data yet that it's just going to prevent prostate cancer, but it's just better for you overall. Reduces your risk of colorectal cancer and all these other cancers that we can say are also equally important.
Well, keep in mind that the studies that were done on these Japanese who migrated to the U.S. as young children, as toddlers, their risk of prostate cancer went up in their first generation in the U.S. We're not talking after mingling with, African, Japanese Americans. We're talking in the first generation transfer to the United States.
They bought that Crisco.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, so, that indicates that they basically got into an accelerated toxic environment.
That's right.
And so that's concerning, because if we're living that every day and have since toddlers, I can imagine why then we have the numbers. I'm sorry.
Then you bring up, geographic risk factors. And, what's in the news right now is in North County, and it's information about the World War II, nuclear storage sites and all.
Right.
And you say that, unfortunately, that has to play some role too.
Right.
That when you think of what we're exposed to and our environment, and then you look at populations of people, white and black, based on occupations, based on exposures in the workplace.
Yes.
Cadmium and exposures to other chemicals. What role that play?
Those are things that it's in the modifiable category, but when you think of economics, then you almost feel like you don't have a choice. This is a risk factor that I can't modify.
That's right.
You're almost pigeonholed into that space where I live, the options that are available to me. And you mentioned that earlier, the options that are available to me then create my space of modifiable or non-modifiable risk. Yeah. But then the common sense things we can. How do we respond?
Well, I say we do the best we can. Okay. The common sense things that we can do is at least follow our prevention and early detection guidelines. Okay. Our women should have mammograms. Our women and men should be getting colonoscopies and screenings for colon cancer, and then also having screenings for prostate cancer, because these are our big major killers in our community, is colorectal, prostate, breast, and then lung. And obviously most lung cancers, 90%, are caused by tobacco use. So if you're not smoking and not around secondhand smoke, that risk reduction is then there. Mm-hmm. So you can wipe out a significant amount of our major causes of death related to cancer by early detection and screening tools and the lifestyle changes.
Absolutely.
But that brings up the point. It's hard to separate these modifiable factors. You don't, smoking still is more prominent based on socioeconomic class.
That's right.
So how do you separate the person who's getting the $1 burger, discount, that's not the same quality meat as the $5 burger, from the person who tends to smoke to the person who works in the work environment where they're working an assembly line with exposure to chemical.
That's right.
We see it on each of these banners in the studio. That's where we see it. Yeah. That's where we see the actual difference. But then in the end, it is that awareness and that education in order to respond.
And there's still that one factor that still remains.
What's that?
That despite all of these risk factors, it doesn't mean that you have to succumb to a tumor. You may be more prone to get it.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
But with today's technology, if you were to participate in preventive health care and see a doctor, not only see a doctor, but see a doctor and see a doctor as an informed individual and say, hey, doc, I'm 51 now. I wonder why you didn't ask me about a colonoscopy last year.
Right.
Hey, doc, I'm 49. I'm African American. I'm clearly African American. Why haven't I had a PSA yet?
Right.
Hey, doc, look, I'm interested in great health. If you're a little queasy about doing my rectal exam or worrying how I'm going to take it, I'm going to take it that you're a good doctor. I really, really prefer if you put your finger in my bottom and tell me what my prostate feels like.
That's right, because I want to be an informed,
an educated, educated consumer.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's a great myth buster and a great transition into, let's talk about these myths that are, as we're seeing them as truths, that are myths. Now, address this putting my finger in my butt thing, help the brothers, sisters, whomever struggling with that, get over it once and for all.
It's certainly more prevalent, or the presumption is more prevalent, the resistance by African American and Hispanic, right? The people at the greatest risk of having this cancer.
Right. How horrible is it, Doc?
Come on. It's less than 5 seconds.
This is what I always say.
1,000, 2,000.
No. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
And it's
done.
over. Okay.
So I always say this, Doc.
I want to be empathetic.
Doctor, your finger's so big. Look, if your average bowel movement is smaller than my finger, you need a colonoscopy sooner than later.
Because something is wrong.
Yeah. And essentially, that's the thing. A normal bowel movement would take longer and be much larger than what this would entail. This is for your benefit.
I struggle with this.
You struggle with your bowel movements?
No, because it's 5 seconds.
Okay.
It's 5 seconds. We're talking about, understanding your risk and your health, and it's 5 seconds.
We can endure many, many things for flames, underwater,
but this
lack of oxygen, all of those things for 5 seconds. But the get over it is it's not that long, it's not that bad, and there could be worse. But in the end.
But it's got more impact than that.
Okay.
And when people try to refuse me to do a rectal exam, the point is, sir, it's a matter of building comfort and rapport between doctor and patient.
That's comfort, all right.
And if I can say, sir, look, this is a finger exam. Would I take care of your high-end car if you wouldn't let me check your car and do a evaluation of your car so that you don't end up on the road and be stuck? And you say, who's your doctor? Who's your mechanic?
Sure.
I'm not going to have people being my patient and say that my doctor is Dr. Bullock, and lo and behold, someone else finds that they got a bladder cancer. Someone else finds that they have a prostate cancer. Why didn't Dr. Bullock find that?
More. So, and that goes back to being informed and being proactive, too.
And if I can get to the point of saying, sir, I'm trying to be a good doctor. And, I say this all the time. Look, there's no cameras, and trust me, I'm not going to put you on the internet telling how I did your rectal exam.
Right.
Nobody's that interested. I do exams all day long. Yeah. Like a brother today. I'm doing a vasectomy, right? We can go in the room, right? And so, because I got to make it here, right? So usually when I walk in the vasectomy, the guy's already undressed. He's covered up. So we get ready to walk in the room. Me and he's like, wait, I'm undressed. I said, dude, we about to look at your balls in a second. Did you forget that you're in the urology room and we're about to have your penis exposed? I'm like, I thought that was funny. Know about that. That's funny.
Like, we're laughing too. And the other thing, though, when we think of our gynecological exams, way more. Not to be unsympathetic.
I stopped saying that when I first came out of training and I was practicing, and these men really were struggling. They were struggling first. You're the first woman that's going to examine me. So that was one issue. And then, do we really have to do it? I can't tell you how many times I've heard that. Yeah. Do we really have to do it? And I used to say, okay, let me just tell you what women have to do. And I would then go through, stirrups and equipment and speculum. But I stopped saying that because there was just no sympathy.
Yeah, that's right.
They're like, that's y'all. You give birth.
That's right.
You, right?
They were
we don't have to do that.
Like, you do you, but that's why I'm a man. So, at this point, I really do just want to talk them through it because I have some patients who legitimately are horrified by the exam. I don't know why. I have a young man. He did a tour in Iraq. He's now a police officer.
Hardcore.
I treated him for prostate cancer 4 or 5 years ago. He still screams when I come in the room, oh Lord, we got to do this. What I mean? It is just, I just have to say that some men do. You got to work through it. You really just have to work through it because there's a phobia.
Be encouraged, my brothers. Be encouraged because you will get through this and you will endure. Okay, I'm going to run a couple of terms by you guys as we're coming to a close to address some possible myths. Diabetes mellitus. That's yours. Then I'm throwing it to you.
No, it's just a question of, do people who have diabetes have a higher or lower incidence of prostate cancer? And there's just been some studies that have shown that there's a lower incidence and it might be related.
And the myth there is?
Well, it's not a myth as much as is, why is that the case? We're not quite sure, but there's just a relationship. The same, one of the others is, does vasectomy increase your risk for prostate cancer? And I think
that's been excluded.
You went out and excluded that, right.
And just testosterone replacement therapy is a big one, and I would say that the data doesn't support it, that it increases your risk of prostate cancer.
That's right. But one of the requirements of a person getting testosterone replacement, if you're out there getting testosterone, someone needs to do your rectal exam, and you need to have a PSA done routinely, if not every 6 months, at least every year. That's the reason why testosterone's a controlled substance. You can only write for it for 6 months at a time.
Wow.
So any drug that you can't write for years refills, there's a reason why the FDA, they're trying to tell you something, that there's some risk involved, and you have to monitor it closely.
Yeah, fantastic. And how about chronic inflammation? I'll toss that to you.
Well, there's prostatitis, which is, you can have chronic prostatitis. There's no evidence that chronic prostatitis increases your risk per se, but the feeling is that people who have chronic prostatitis probably see a urologist on a more regular basis. So if you took a group of 1,000 men who didn't have prostatitis and 1,000 men who did have prostatitis, the 1,000 men with prostatitis are certainly seeing a urologist. So if anyone's getting screened, it's those men.
Okay.
And so sometimes it's not that the prostatitis increases your risk of cancer. It's just that as a population, you're more likely to be screened.
Excellent.
Just like millionaires.
Yeah.
The millionaires, in order to keep a $10 million life insurance policy, they guaranteed they're going to want you to come in and get tested every time you think you want to re-up on that.
Yeah.
So that
right.
person's being screened closer.
Absolutely.
So he could have more rare diseases
Right.
picked up only because he's being screened more often.
Sure. I love that. In
Right.
synchronicity. So stats and facts are our very next episode of Our Healthy Men Prostate Cancer Question and Answer Show. Takeaways for you today?
That times have changed. We've made amazing progress. The prostate cancer mortality has decreased 40% from when we talked about people presenting with metastatic disease. A third of white American men and 2/3 of African American men, and today less than 5% presenting with metastatic disease. We have made progress, but we still have a long way to go. We said that African American men have a 70% higher incidence and a 2.4 times greater mortality still, despite that improvement. So how do we reduce that? We realize that if it's detected early, survival is outstanding, excellent. And so we got to talk about screening and how to do that. That's coming up. But the whole point is we want to keep this train going forward.
Absolutely. Your takeaway, Dr. Bullock.
So, ditto.
What she said.
There's modifiable factors that we need to try to improve upon. And they're not just for prostate cancer. It's our diet and our failure to exercise that plays a key role in our higher death rate. I don't care why people die. I think it should be bad to think that you have a higher risk of dying younger than the guy next to you. And some of it we can control. So if we were to exercise, if we were to cut back on some of the processed foods and some of the fatty content of our diet, we would live longer from a cancer point of view and even more so from a cardiac point of view. So we are at a higher risk of prostate cancer and other cancers. And we can't change our father. We can't change where we work for the most part, and many times we can't change where we live, but we can eat better, we can exercise, and we can vow to see a doctor on a regular basis and not just see a doctor. There's different qualities of doctors. You have to go in and be informed. You have to put your doctor on point and say, I refuse to let you charge me for a 2-minute visit. And now I'm going to call that an acceptable doctor's visit.
And you didn't touch me.
And you didn't touch me.
See?
That's no good. Every 3 months just to check my medicines and check my vital signs?
Yes.
I wouldn't accept it at a restaurant. I don't think you're supposed to accept it from your doctor.
No,
Absolutely.
and you're paying insurance.
And you're paying insurance. We will continue this conversation on our next episode of Our Healthy Men. Dr. Arnold Bullock, Dr. Lannis Hall, thank you both again for your contribution. Knowledge is power, and we will be informed and empowered on this program. We'll talk to you next time. I'm Jade Harrell. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our Healthy Men, the Prostate Cancer Question and Answer radio show. The Prostate Cancer Coalition emphasizes the significant advancements in the detection and staging of prostate cancer, and that PSA is just one of many options available to help you make an educated decision. The Our Healthy Men radio show is made possible by Siteman Cancer Center and the Barnes Jewish Foundation, with your hosts, Dr. Lannis Hall, radiation oncologist with Siteman Cancer Center, and Dr. Arnold Bullock, urologic surgeon with Washington University. I'm producer Jade Harrell. To listen to the full episodes, for resources, to find a doctor, or to learn about events and free screenings in the St. Louis region, visit prostatecancercoalitionstl.org. Now you can listen to all of our shows on the iHeartRadio app from anywhere. And of course, we want to hear from you. Send us your questions, your comments, and especially your personal story, knowing that yours can be a help to others. Our Healthy Men is another positive production of Rare Gem Productions. Thanks for listening.